Madame la Présidente, c'est avec beaucoup d'émotion que je me lève afin de m'adresser à cette Chambre au sujet du projet de loi sur l'aide médicale à mourir. Premièrement, ce projet de loi est le résultat d'une décision de la Cour supérieure du Québec. Cette Cour que je connais si bien, ce tribunal devant lequel, dans ma vie antérieure, j'ai eu l'immense honneur et responsabilité de plaider. Les avocats du barreau du Québec, Madame la Présidente, ont le privilège d'avoir un des meilleurs tribunaux dans le monde. Cette Cour, Madame la Présidente, nous a rendu un jugement et au lieu d'en faire appel, le gouvernement libéral a dit oui. Oui, le Québec va encore une fois montrer la voie pour le pays tout entier. Oui, notre Québec progressiste, visionnaire, va guider le Canada. Et ça, Madame la Présidente, ça me rend fière en tant qu'avocate, mais aussi en tant que députée québécoise au sein de notre gouvernement fédéral. Le projet de loi C7 a pour but de s'assurer que les personnes comme Mme Gladue et M. Truchon aient les mêmes droits, les mêmes options, la même liberté que ceux qui font face à une mort imminente et raisonnablement prévisible. The ruling in Truchon found the eligibility criteria of reasonably foreseeable natural death to be unconstitutional. Our government also agrees that MAID should be available to relieve suffering and pain from serious medical conditions and is now proposing through this legislation to amend the criminal code so that Canadians can end their lives with medical assistance if that is the right choice for them. To accomplish this, Bill C7 proposes to repeal the requirement that natural death be reasonably foreseeable, opening up access to those who are suffering in a wider set of circumstances. The changes to the legislation propose to create two pathways in terms of the procedures that must be followed to assess a request for medical assistance in dying. And while I don't have time to get into the details of the two regimes in full, there are a number of points that I wish to highlight today. For those people who are suffering intolerably from a serious medical condition, but whose death is not reasonably foreseeable, the safeguards put in place emphasize the importance of ensuring that sufficient time is taken to evaluate the request. A minimum of 90 days will be needed so that the person can be assessed by a doctor who has some experience with this condition, which will help to ensure that the person gets all of the information, services, and tools that might help them improve their quality of life. Le projet de loi C7 crée également des nouvelles mesures de sauvegarde autour du consentement. Bien entendu, la personne indique son consentement pour le programme d'aide médicale à mourir lorsqu'elle demande à être évaluée pour celui-ci. Et elle exprime certainement son consentement à le recevoir lorsqu'elle signe officiellement sa demande. Mais le consentement qui importe le plus est celui au moment de l'AMM. Il faudra toujours avoir la certitude qu'une personne souhaite recevoir de l'aide pour mourir ou le moment où elle le reçoit. Les médecins seront plus à l'aise de procéder, Madame la Présidente, dans de telles circonstances. Mais certains, en raison du type particulier de leur maladie, risquent de perdre leur capacité à donner leur consentement entre le moment où ils sont approuvés pour l'AMM et le jour où ils souhaiteraient le recevoir. Bien que nous nous attendions à ce que la plupart des personnes soient prêtes pour l'AMM assez rapidement, une fois qu'elles sont approuvées, certaines peuvent avoir un désir d'attendre un événement particulier. Pensons par exemple à un mariage d'un enfant ou la naissance d'un petit enfant. Pour ceux qui veulent attendre avant de procéder à l'AMM, s'il y a un risque de perte de capacité, un dilemme impossible se pose. Soit ils attendent leur moment familial spécial et risquent de perdre leur capacité à mourir de la manière qu'ils ont choisie, soit ils avancent la date de l'intervention et manquent un moment très important avec leur famille et leurs proches. Ce projet de loi permettrait donc à une personne qui risque réellement de perdre sa capacité de consentir avant la date choisie pour l'AMM de prendre des dispositions spéciales avec leur médecin. Cet accord doit être mis par écrit, Madame la Présidente. Le médecin et l'individu doivent travailler ensemble pour parvenir à un accord qui fonctionnera pour les deux. Cette garantie est importante pour l'individu et aussi pour les médecins qui sont ceux qui portent l'énorme fardeau de mettre fin à la vie de quelqu'un. Le projet de loi aborde également une autre situation difficile. Supposons le jour venu que la personne ait effectivement perdu sa capacité à consentir à l'AMM, mais qu'elle reste consciente et alerte, bien qu'elle ne soit pas lucide. Et supposons qu'elle agit ou fait des gestes qui indiquent clairement qu'elle ne veut pas recevoir l'AMM. Le projet de loi aborde cette situation, que l'on espère évidemment rare, en indiquant clairement que le médecin ne doit pas procéder, car dans ce cas, ce n'est plus la volonté de la personne. The concept of freedom and of choice, for me, remains central to all of this. I watched my grandmother suffer from Alzheimer's. Not long after I was born, she was diagnosed. And when I was very young, she used to repeat the same stories over and over again to me about her own life and the life lessons that she wanted to pass on. She would tell me about how she used to work 2 and then 3 jobs, taking shifts overnight in order to buy her family's first home and provide a better life for her children. What that repetition instilled in me was certainly a sense and an understanding that my grandmother was probably the strongest woman I knew, that she was a force of nature. When I was about 7 or 8, she forgot who I was, she forgot who everybody was, and I had to, of course, very painfully remind her every time I saw her. By the time I was 10, she no longer remembered language at all, and it was just humming, which I still somehow found very soothing and comforting, and somehow okay. But the degradation from there continued. Her eyes no longer opened at all. She was in a wheelchair. The humming had completely stopped. And when I was 15, the only muscles that worked were reflexive ones. Even if nothing else in her body moved, she would chew food if it were put into her mouth. It took 2 people to move her from her wheelchair to her bed or to change her. And this situation went on like this for 10 years. 10 years, Madam Speaker. As a teenager, I used to wonder constantly what it would feel like to be trapped in a body like that, wondering if that was really the same strong woman in there or not. 10 years listening to hushed voices in the kitchen saying, but there's nothing that we can do. I don't know for sure, of course, what my grandmother would have decided for herself, but I do know for sure what I would want. And to those who would decide something different for themselves, or for whom their beliefs are contrary to assisted dying, what this framework does is to provide everybody with the freedom to decide for themselves. It is not a crime under the criminal code to take one's own life. It is a crime to take someone else's. And the changes made to ensure that those people who need and who would like doctors to help them in order to end their life with dignity at the time that they choose can do so. MAID is certainly one of the most challenging social issues in our society, which is made up of people with very diverse viewpoints and needs. I believe that this bill achieves the right balance between the freedoms and rights of those who are dying and who are seeking a peaceful medically assisted death, and our medical practitioners that need a clear framework for timing and for consent. I call on all members of this House to support Bill C-7, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Questions and comments? The honourable member for Sturgeon River.
Parkland.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I thank my colleague for that very moving statement and the importance of choice. When I think about this, I'm thinking about the horrible situation that's been uncovered in long-term care homes across this country. I'm thinking of a gentleman named Roger Foley from London, Ontario, who has a degrading neurological condition, but he is not being adequately supported by our healthcare system. He is not getting assisted living. And so how can people be truly given a choice when their choice is between living horribly in a healthcare system that does not support people or having a medical assistance in dying? Wouldn't the member agree that we need to invest more in our healthcare system, more in improving the lives of our seniors and those with diseases before pushing forward and liberalizing assisted dying? Thank you.
Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I thank the honourable member for his important question, and I don't disagree with him in the sense that I do believe that we need to ensure that the quality of life that is available to our elderly, the people who are living in assisted homes and assisted living centres across the country need to be living and need to have the option of living with dignity. But I don't believe the two are mutually exclusive. Our government has invested in healthcare recently. We have made numerous transfers to the provinces in order to make sure that our seniors are being cared for, and we will continue to do so. But that does not mean that medical assistance in dying shouldn't move forward at the same time. Thank you.
Des commentaires, l'honorable député de Beauport-Limoilou.
Merci, Madame la Présidente. Je tiens à remercier ma collègue pour son discours qui était très personnel, très poignant. Et justement, je vais revenir avec la question de prévisibilité de la mort. L'Alzheimer a des étapes déterminées. Sa grand-mère est passée au travers. J'en ai aussi près de moi qui ont passé au travers. Il y a différentes formes de démence qu'on peut avoir en vieillissant. Certaines semblent plus douces que d'autres. Et il y en a d'autres qui sont vraiment lourdes. À ce moment-là, est-ce qu'il serait bon de mettre dans la loi, selon certains critères très bien établis, qu'il serait possible de consentir de façon prévisible à l'aide médicale à mourir?
L'honorable secrétaire parlementaire.
Merci, merci Madame la Présidente, et je remercie ma collègue. Je pense que c'est une conversation que nous devons continuer à avoir. Je pense qu'il faut aller demander les Canadiens s'ils sont d'accord, ce avec quoi ils sont confortables. Ce n'est certainement pas exclu, mais au moment où on se parle, nous avons mis de l'avant quelque chose qui, je crois, répond non seulement à la Cour supérieure du Québec, mais aussi à la demande de ceux qui ont utilisé et qui ont bénéficié de l'aide médicale à mourir. Je pense qu'il y aura certainement plus à faire. Je sais qu'au Québec, c'est un enjeu très réel et que mes commettants aussi me posent la même question. Et je crois qu'il faut continuer la conversation afin de voir comment nous pouvons aller de l'avant dans l'avenir.
Des commentaires, questions and comments. The honourable member for Yorkton Millville.
Thank you very much, Speaker. And I appreciated the words of my colleague across the floor. My father passed away in February just before COVID from Alzheimer's and 9 long years in care. However, I also do know what his desire was. And she spoke, Madam Speaker, of choice. And that, I think, is the issue here, right down to the choice for doctors. She talks about making sure that those safeguards are in place. What about doctors who do not feel that they can go forward in participating in this? They are not being properly protected across our country, and as well, the Canadian Society of Palliative Care Physicians have made it clear that euthanasia and palliative care are two very distinct things. And how does she feel about her government's position on palliative care, and would she be willing to say that those two things are very distinct and should be able to exist independently?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and also thank my colleague for the question. I have spoken to a few doctors who have told me that they themselves are uncomfortable with the procedure and that they have a system in place which appears to be working, in which they can refer to their colleagues, other practitioners, in order to perform medical assistance in dying. That appears to be working for some. I'm not aware, of course, of the situation of all medical practitioners across the country, but I certainly was comforted to hear from a number of doctors for different reasons, including religious beliefs, they do not feel comfortable, and there is a process in place which they have found for referrals. I would also note that medical practitioners do have a moral obligation to...
Reprise du débat.